So I emailed him back and said, yeah, it's in the Marauders Castle in the second Ewok movie.
Of course.
But then it was Tom who realized that if you took the top off of it, it was the stand-up bass.
He shows me this picture. We were at a Google event, and he's like, "Oh yeah, look at this thing we found from the Ewok movie." Like, do you know what that is? He's like, "What? That's one of the cantina instruments." And it was it. You took the little thing off the top. It still had the little like air purifier thing on the bottom. And I'm frantically trying to find a picture from the holiday special on my phone because it's the only place you see it clearly. But looking in this picture, there it is in the holiday special. There it is in the background of the second Ewok movie. Sorry, mistitled there. And then on the right, with a floppy hat on top of it, there it is on set for the Star Wars shoot.
So we were very happy to tell the Skywalker archives that yes, you do have an original cantina instrument,
Which is amazing. And now this is another one this is a photo that one of the 1977 ILMers recently dug up. This is from his own archives. There's a shot on the right of stuff he didn't even know what it was. He thought it was for this shoot, but he didn't know it was to be the instruments. And it turns out it's all part of the sort of like marimba setup that the guy in the back has. So this is the sort of level of archaeology we go through, because we try and figure out who played who, and it's really tough. There were no records, especially for this shoot.
Yes.
And memories are spotty. People who were there, you know, like, oh, I was in a rubber mask, you know. Which one? I don't know, it was a wolf guy. There's two that could be considered a wolf. So I found this picture was a picture Phil Tippett had, and we looked and we're like, all right, so there's two different guys in that were the Duros, aliens, and we got that. And then we look and, you know, there's the same shoes on this guy on the left in the band. So we're like, all right, so those two are the same guy. By the way, if you ever see band members wearing boots, they are holiday special cosplayers, not Star Wars cosplayers, because in Star Wars they didn't wear boots, they just had regular pants. And then the Gibbon also has these same knockoff Adidas missing a stripe shoes. By the way, the knockoff shoes are the chosen footwear of struggling effects artists in the 1970s. And George Lucas is just disappointed that we're even having this conversation right in the background there. And of course, we found out ultimately it's John Berg, who is a wonderful human being, a really talented guy. You can just barely see his head popping up there, but this is the only shot where you can see John Berg's face and his shoes at the same time. You've heard of a smoking gun? We have smoking shoes. Hashtag smoking shoes. So, I love this shirt. So this is Rick Baker, a young Rick Baker, prior to Star Wars, probably 1974, 75 era, and he had pitched making was it Phil Schneer, who's the producer on the Sinbad movies? He had pitched to him doing some licensed masks, and one of them was the Cyclops from Golden Voyage of Sinbad. And ultimately, that mask was converted into, or a casting of it, converted into the Cyclops for Star Wars. It wasn't ever used, Rick never released it, but he still had the mold, and Lane Liska then reworked it into this character, which I think is just super, super cool.
And this is one of these realities where, you know, when the Star Wars universe really started to get expanded in the late 80s and 90s, the folks who were in charge of that stuff didn't necessarily have all the access to the archives that are now available now, right? So, the Cyclops guy, whose production name was Cyclops Guy, and was also Syed for a while. You know, all we had was photography, all they had was photography of the head. So the artist went and extrapolated that he's this gigantic alien named Mayo the Abyssin, who is this big hulking thing. But that's because they never had reference to the photography that was actually on set, and you realize that the Cyclops is not a big hulking.
You don't know how big that guy in the yellow shirt is.
Yeah, that's right.
He's a union guy. He can be huge. Huge.
These are the kind of things that we discover.
My New Yorkness comes out from time to time. I apologize. So there's a Cyclops sitting with one of the Duros who's getting a little fresh air between takes. They actually had like an oxygen tank, and they ran a tube into the masks to get a little air in. There is not a lot of air. There aren't a lot of air holes in the stuff that Rick Baker's crew made, because most of them were stop motion animators, and they didn't realize that the people in the masks had to see or breathe. So there's stop motion animator Phil Tippett, growing his beard so he can wear it with those flashy shades, and sculpting the Duros. In the background, there's Doug Beswick working on the Bith alien, and of course one of my absolute favorites, the Given, based on Macquarie's sketch in the front. Bottom right are some hand molds. We'll probably talk about those later. And in the middle is Phil's sketch, trying to figure out how that would relate to a human being inside Ron Cobb's design. Ultimately,
look at it, basically.
Yeah.
And what's funny is they don't look out the eyes.
No, there's two tiny nostrils with tiny little holes, and that's where you see, well, you try to see out of one of those masks. Also, the human head in there is tiny. Look how huge that noggin is next to Phil's.
Yeah, which is funny because we've since done Clone Wars, and we've had the character of Cad Bane, who is a Duros, yet we're supposed to believe that he could disguise himself as a clone in one of the episodes, when in truth that head would not fit in any one of those eyes.
I actually have one of the masks that was used in the movie, and it is massive. You would never be able to fit a helmet even on the chin of it. There's one of the castings up on the top with a balloon taped to him. It was someone's birthday at the shop, and Rick in the foreground, John Berg on the bottom right, Doug Beswick in the background with what looks like an old-timey Dremel in his hands. There were notes on the board, but one of my favorites, just like, Rick, Rob took his Martian, we'll bring it back.
If you take your Martian,
please
leave it down.
Yeah, no, don't just take it. These spacesuits probably look familiar to anybody that knows the cantina well, and if they don't, they'll look familiar soon. This is from Jerry Lewis' movie called Way, Way Out. The same spacesuits were also used in Escape from the Planet of the Apes, in Like Flint, the Get Smart show, and on John Berg with his smoking shoes. And also from Planet of the Apes, you get a reappearance of the vest that the apes wore on what became known as Jaspur.
I don't know how to pronounce his name. It's Jaspur is his current expanded universe name. On set, he was either known as Future Man or Coal Man.
And so Future Man was actually what Rick called this mask originally. It's a mask that he sculpted in the early 70s to be a Halloween mask. The bottom right is Rick's personal copy. That actually wound up being used in the holiday special with the fleshy paint job. They cast another copy of it, they painted him almost all black, and that's what wound up in Star Wars. And here's another, so the top right is a really cool picture. That's all early Rick Baker stuff. And you got three cantina aliens in that picture. You got the Future Man on the right, Terminal Man in the sort of middle left, and up in the top is the wolf guy.
And it's important to note that these were not intended to be cantina aliens. They were pre-existing masks that Rick Baker basically repurposed for the cantina.
To help fill it out, give them more. The top left is how Terminal Man looked in the movie. They called him Terminal Man because he has these little metal terminals on the side of his head. The reason those are there is because Rick Baker intended this to be a type of Frankenstein character. It was his take on it. And ultimately, that wound up, we'll go to this in a minute. But so anyway, Terminal Man was a Frankenstein mask, and that's still what Rick calls it. You talk to him, he's like, oh, that's my Frankenstein. Does anybody know the crew name for this alien, by the way?
Don Rickles.
Don Rickles, exactly. And now you see why, right? That was sculpted by Rob Bottin, and it turns up in the movie here. He's putting a tube into his nose to get some air.
And he has since been renamed as Baum Vinden as the character, and Osek is his alien. But in our hearts, he will always be
Don Rickles. And George Lucas likes to point at things. We have a lot of behind-the-scenes photos of this shoot in particular, where he's just like, that guy. But look on the back left. This is one of...
This was on our Inception for the longest time. He was a version of Terminal Man with the Chinzia's mustache applied to him.
It was something that, you and even Leland initially were like, who is this guy? I think Leland was the one like, what is this? And I saw it, I'm like, that's Terminal Man with a mustache. And we eventually went through and we looked and we finally found some better pictures from the sort of making of. And there he is in the middle. You can kind of see the little mustache. He's got a little patch of hair right here. I don't know why. And ultimately, we did find, there's actual Terminal Man. But they are two different masks. So regular Terminal Man is just right there. He's a little darker paint. played by a woman on set wearing clogs. I don't know if you can see him in the picture, of sandals. You can see John Berg hiding under a blanket there.
Looks like an old-timey photographer.
Yeah, exactly. Hold still. And then, of course, Phil Tippett, the first thing you see in this picture. But eventually we found this shot, these two shots, which really clearly show it's different paint, it's a different mask, it is a mustache. And I showed them to Rick Baker and I said, you know, Rick, I think this is Terminal Man and someone put a mustache on, what do you think? And he said, that's my Frankenstein, but I don't know who put that stupid mustache on him. And I'm like, yeah, I don't know either. Oh, a little bit, yeah. So here's a little side-by-side of some of the sketches. You have Ralph McQuarrie's beautiful given sketch and John Berg's sculpt. Yes, or Skull Guy. He also has a bit of a Scream look about him, you know? And then there's the brain guy in the works, and Rick's evil brain guy, sort of very angular and gnarly looking. This is a bold move. Does anybody mold and cast stuff out there? All right, I got one guy. Any words for me? No, okay, I got a few more. But this is John Berg putting a seam right down the center of the face on Skull Guy, which is just, anybody who's ever had to clean up a seam on a rubber mask, that's bold. And that's a very young Rob Bottin, sans beard and long hair, which he very soon after adopted, sculpting on the brain guy. Rick started this, and then Rob went in and did the finish work on it. I love this photo. I like that they put actual eye forms in there. It really like informs in your sculpting. And the brain guy is a bit of a reuser as well. He uses he wears a costume that came from